Alex had always been known in his town as a skilled and compassionate dog rehabilitator, especially for German shepherds. With over 15 years of experience as a police dog handler and an additional 10 years of private work, Alex had seen his fair share of troubled dogs. But when he received a call from the local animal control service, even his expertise couldn't prepare him for the challenge he was about to face. It was late afternoon, and Alex had just finished working with a German shepherd, helping it adjust to a new family. He was tired but content, knowing he had made a difference in another dog's life. That was when the call came in. A dog named Gray, a German shepherd, had spent nearly his entire life chained in the yard of a private house. The officer's voice sounded desperate, and Alex could tell this was a case that needed urgent attention. Unfortunately, Alex's car was in the shop, so a veterinarian from an animal protection society picked him up. On the way to the house, they discussed the situation. Even with Alex's extensive experience, it seemed daunting. The dog wasn't just scared of people. It had become wild and uncontrollable, ready to attack anyone who came near. Gray had been chained up for so long that he had turned into a frantic, fearful animal. The thought of approaching him was terrifying, but Alex was determined to try. When they arrived at the house, Alex quickly realized that the situation was even worse than he had imagined. Gray, a large, imposing German shepherd, was tied to a doghouse with a heavy chain. As soon as he spotted the visitors, Gray began barking ferociously, his body stiff with aggression. His matted fur hung loosely around his body, and his eyes burned with a mixture of fear and fury. Alex stood frozen for a moment, taken aback by the intensity of the dog's reaction. The dog lunged toward the fence, his metal chain rattling loudly as he tried to reach Alex and the veterinarian. The sound of the chain scraping against the ground was harsh, echoing through the yard. Every movement was filled with aggression. Gray's teeth were bared, and his growls sent shivers down Alex's spine. The owner of the dog, standing at a safe distance, explained, "He hasn't let anyone near him for over a year. I just leave food for him and walk away. I tried petting him once, but he nearly bit my hand off. The last time I replaced the chain, I had to put sleeping pills in his food just to get close." Alex sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the situation. He had dealt with aggressive dogs before, but this was different. Gray wasn't just acting out of fear. He had become a wild, untamed animal. Despite this, Alex was determined to help him. He pulled some boiled meat from his bag, a trick he often used with aggressive dogs. He stepped forward cautiously and offered it to Gray, hoping the dog would see the food as a sign of kindness. But Gray didn't even look at it. Instead, he continued barking, his eyes never leaving Alex, his rage palpable. Alex stepped back a little, hoping to avoid startling the dog. The seconds dragged on, and Alex thought about how far the dog had fallen into his fear and anger. Gray's violent reaction was a painful reminder of just how cruelly he had been treated over the years. The time for patience was now. Alex stood in the yard, facing a dog that was so full of fear and rage, it seemed impossible to bridge the gap. The tension in the air was thick as Gray barked non-stop, his voice raw with panic. Each growl was louder, more intense, as the dog tried to reach Alex, his eyes locked on him with distrust and aggression. The heavy chain that bound Gray to the doghouse creaked under the strain as he lunged forward, desperate to escape. Alex's heart raced, but he remained calm. He had dealt with aggressive dogs before, but this was different. He had to approach carefully. Gray's fear was palpable, and it was clear that the dog had been neglected for far too long. The years of isolation had turned him into a shell of a dog, a creature controlled by instinct and rage. The other people in the yard, including the dog's owner, stood at a distance, hesitant to intervene. They watched as Alex slowly moved toward the dog, each step measured, each movement calculated to avoid alarming him. Alex's voice remained soft as he tried to calm Gray. "It's okay," he said gently, though the dog's angry barking only intensified. No matter how much Alex tried to talk to him in soothing tones, Gray continued to lash out. It was clear the dog had no trust left in people. He was too far gone, too damaged by years of mistreatment. But then Alex noticed something, a subtle shift in Gray's behavior. When Alex spoke softly, the dog's ears twitched slightly. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Alex hope. The dog wasn't entirely unreachable. There was still a chance to break through to him, to show him that not all humans were enemies. Knowing he had to keep trying, Alex decided to approach the situation differently. He slowly turned his back on the dog, pretending to lose interest in him. This was a risky move. If the dog perceived this as a weakness, it could escalate the aggression. But to his surprise, the barking stopped. The low growl remained, but there was a new element in the silence, a sense of confusion. Gray was watching, trying to understand what Alex was doing. For the next hour, Alex worked patiently, inching closer to the dog little by little. Each step was slow, deliberate, as he tested the waters. When Gray's growls didn't increase, Alex took another tiny step forward. The closer he got, the more he noticed something remarkable. The dog was no longer lunging at him in blind fury. There was still tension in his body, but Gray was beginning to show signs of curiosity rather than aggression. Alex sat down on the ground, a few steps away from the dog, giving him space. The evening sun started to set, casting a soft glow over the yard, and time passed slowly. Gray's growls gradually softened, shifting from anger to uncertainty. The dog's body, once rigid with fear, started to relax ever so slightly. His tail, tucked tightly beneath him, began to drop, just a little. It was a small change, but it was a momentous breakthrough. Alex stayed where he was, allowing Gray to process everything at his own pace. For the first time, the dog seemed to question whether the human in front of him was a threat. It wasn't much, but it was progress. It was the beginning of a slow, painful journey toward trust. Hours passed, and the evening sky turned to dusk, the shadows lengthening as Alex stayed still on the ground, allowing Gray the space he needed to process. The barking had stopped, replaced by a low, almost hesitant growl. It wasn't the same vicious bark Alex had first encountered. It was softer, more uncertain, like the dog was trying to make sense of what was happening. The yard, once filled with tension, now felt quieter. The wind howled in the distance, but the air between Alex and Gray seemed to calm. The dog's posture had changed as well. Though his lips still curled slightly, showing a trace of his teeth, his body no longer appeared as tense as before. Gray's tail, which had been tightly tucked between his legs, began to drop a little, though it remained still. This was no longer a dog consumed with rage. This was a dog beginning to relax, to take tentative steps toward trusting again. Alex knew the moment had arrived. He could feel the change in the air, a shift from fear to curiosity, a sign that Gray was no longer viewing him as an enemy. Alex's body remained still, almost motionless, so as not to trigger any more aggression. The dog was watching him closely, his amber eyes filled with a new light, no longer clouded by the rage of years spent chained. Carefully, Alex reached into his bag and pulled out a special pole designed to work with aggressive dogs. This was a critical moment. The chain that had confined Gray for so long still held the dog in place, and Alex knew that any sudden movement could push the dog back into his defensive state. The chain was the only barrier that kept Gray from running or attacking, and Alex knew that releasing him would be a monumental step in his rehabilitation. Slowly, Alex moved towards Gray. Every inch felt like a lifetime, but the dog didn't react the way Alex feared. Instead, Gray stood still, his muscles tight but not in attack mode. His gaze never wavered, And though his body was still full of tension, it wasn't the raw, frantic energy it had been before. For the first time, the dog allowed Alex to get close enough. As Alex gently removed the chain from Gray's neck, the transformation began. The heavy metal link that had bound the dog for so long fell to the ground with a soft thud, and for a moment, nothing happened. Gray stood perfectly still, almost as though he was taking in the enormity of the situation. Then, in a moment that seemed almost surreal, the invisible barrier that had held Gray back for so long seemed to lift. With a cautious step, Gray moved forward, his body relaxed for the first time in years. He was free, not just from the chain, but from the mental prison that had been built over a lifetime of isolation and fear. As the dog stepped into the animal protection van, Alex couldn't believe his eyes. Gray didn't struggle, didn't try to bite or escape. He moved calmly, his movements tentative but peaceful, showing none of the aggression that had once ruled his existence. It was a miracle, a testament to the power of freedom and trust. Over the next few hours, as Alex spent more time with Gray, the changes were profound. The dog's posture softened, his gaze turned gentle, and for the first time in a long while, he cautiously approached Alex's hand. Not to attack, but to investigate. His tail, once tightly tucked in fear, began to wag just a little, a small but undeniable sign of his transformation. By the end of the night, Gray was no longer the frightened, aggressive animal that Alex had first encountered. He was a completely different dog, calm, friendly, and eager for human affection. The transformation was nothing short of extraordinary, and it proved the power of compassion, patience, and the removal of the chains, both physical and emotional, that had held him captive for so long. Alex couldn't help but feel immense satisfaction, knowing he had given Gray the freedom he needed to live a life free of fear. And as the story spread, Alex shared it in his lectures, reminding everyone that sometimes all it takes is removing the chains to help a dog reveal its true nature. Have you ever witnessed a transformation like Gray's? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you believe in the power of compassion and patience to heal, like this story, and share it with others who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible rescue stories that prove nothing is impossible when you choose to make a difference. And remember, the next time you see a dog struggling or in need, think about what a little kindness and freedom can do. Every dog deserves a chance at happiness. Let's spread the word and work together to make a change.